Heya folks, I'm Arlyeon and welcome to another episode of Critical Review. Today's game is a bit different from the fare that we've tended towards in other reviews, or in general really, given that Hacknet is a surprisingly nuanced, in-depth, and at times scarily accurate hacking simulator, and by extension, text-based adventure plus puzzle game. So yes, it does do a way better job of depicting hacking than that shitty mid-90s like Hackers movie, which was called Hackers. But anyways, the game has humble roots, as the original prototype of the game had been created in 2011 for a 48-hour game jam. There'll be a link to the video to it in the comment section below. That said, developer Matt Trobiani picked up that prototype again afterwards and proceeded to flesh it out over the course of 2 years, and a number of months, eventually releasing the game in August of 2015, as developer studio Team Fractal Alligator. The end result is a game that has a far more retro playstyle with some interesting twists, using traditional command prompts in tandem with a simple but fairly intuitive interface to simulate the experience of being a hacker. Well, that, and a storyline that manages to provide a sort of glimpse at the internet that's sometimes funny, sometimes spooky, and altogether dystopian and cyberpunky. All while you get to jam out to an absolutely excellent soundtrack to die for. But enough about me gushing about the game in the Cliff Notes section. There's a lot I want to talk about the unique gameplay of the game, so let's get started on the finer points. Gameplay-wise, given that Hacknet is essentially a how to hack the Gibson simulator, done right, and that reference is hidden in the game even, it's interesting that the presentation and how you play is done in a manner that's reminiscent of actual programming, though still fairly simplified. That said, this can make the learning curve for the game a little steep, as it's essentially controlled via keyboard in a sort of simulated command interface, requiring players to discover, memorize, and ultimately master a varied number of commands and programs, frequently in a timed setting. You are provided a fairly simple to follow tutorial that does teach you the basic commands and give you an idea of what your overarching goal is, but once it's done, the game's pretty quick to leave you to your own devices and let you sort everything out. And honestly, it works fairly well, both in a narrative sense and the gameplay at large, since a piece of the puzzle is frequently figuring out what you need to do next and where to go, and that process can be, in and of itself, somewhat involved. Sometimes you might have to find out if the sucker you invaded has another computer on his network, or a phone, while other times you might even have to go down the rabbit hole and track down something via IP. The game introduces these concepts to you and then tends to innovate on them. And once you've found your target, well, it only gets more complicated from there. As mentioned above, the hacking sequences, especially the later ones, tend to be timed. Something which lends itself to a sense of urgency as you're frequently left frantically typing in firewall passwords or nervously trying to overload a server's defenses and watching as time trickles down. And those initial defenses tend to then belie the secondary and somewhat more central part of the hacking section of the game, which requires you to rapidly and accurately hammer out commands in an effort to penetrate the ports of the computer so you can hijack it. And your computer has the RAM capacity of something pre-Y2K bug. Maybe it's all the RAM is being taken up by that slick hacking program and this is all that's left? I don't know, conspiracy theories. Eventually you'll reach a point where you time out, and that's when the tracing minigame starts up, which actually can lead to a game over. This segment has its own particular puzzle towards solving it, but it's an excellently tense moment that accompanies the first time you get traced and has a great bit of musical accompaniment. In any case, the acquisition, utilization, and mastery of all these programs and commands is required to persevere throughout the game, especially if you hope to tackle some of the optional challenges present in both Hacknet or its DLC expansion, Labyrinths. The CCC Hack Squad server, the Polaris Challenge servers, and the Gibson. Yes, this game totally has a reference to the Hackers movies I riffed on, and it provides some seriously fun and interesting challenges at the same time. Though, on the note of programs, not all of those programs you acquire are for directly offensive capacities. Whilst many do open up alternative routes for you to hack, or further upgrade those routes, FTP, bounce, and sprint respectively, or provide utility needed to progress, the decoding program and trace kill, Others are more for aesthetic purposes or fun, like having a music player or a background changer or a clock. The hunt for clock.exe is real. There's like 4 of those things. Oh, and on the note of the DLC, gameplay-wise, it's where you get some of those alternative programs, and it also provides some definitely interesting twists on the scenarios that players would have familiarized themselves with the main game. So just solid as a gameplay experience. Speaking of scenarios, the writing for the game's story arcs, plural, is fairly solid, and I found it fun and easy to get into, without Hacknet ever needing to indulge in the aggravating trope that other story-oriented games too often indulge in. Namely, force-feeding me dialogue across the course of excessively long and often unskippable exposition scenes where I can't even play the game. Fuck you, so many JRPGs. What we get instead of that is the game kicking off by the player receiving an email from someone named Bit, who assures, okay, this might not be the right word, but well, he kindly lets us know that he's deader than a dodo. And then he's contacting us because he wants us to get contacted, past tense? I mean, he's dead. Okay, anyways. So he's contacting us because he wants us to get to the bottom of the situation that's led to his probably not greatly exaggerated demise. And then you're given access to a scarily efficient hacking program so that you can plunge into the depths of the internet to piece the whole situation together, navigating a combination of forum boards, emails, and text documents to piece together the situation, the communities, and the world at large. Sure, there's a tutorial that teaches you the basics while through a combination of emails and gameplay segments, but as the story medium goes, I actually found it quite nice, since I could go, advance through the emails at my own pace. You can close them at any time, or go back and read them at your leisure. And they did a marvelous job of not only conveying personality, but also giving you a pretty solid idea of where your starting point for your next task was. And honestly, when I say that I found the story to be solid, what I really mean in this case is to be quite excellent, because not only did it drag me into an interesting sort of seemingly close to modern times, but still very cyberpunky feeling scenario, but it also managed to involve me in its world at large, the odd snippets of conversation directed to me via emails, and, well, the emails and documents I was busy sifting through like an unscrupulous busybody. Hack the planet, anyone? The fact that certain elements of the story actually change based on your choices is empowering, but also keeps the experience very personalized, and, well, in the case of the DLC, it makes your choices all the more meaningful. No spoilers here, sorry, but man, there's some quality memes to read through in some of these people's computers. Oh, and again, on the subject of the DLC, it does manage to introduce a different and interesting way for the story to be presented to you, a la chat room with NPCs, which tend to update as you progress through the missions. And having progressed through the main campaign first, it was neat to see dialogue between hackers and stuff happening while I was poking away at servers. So that's my piece said on the story part of this game, so I'm going to touch on the music now, and I literally have nothing to say about the music for both the main game and the DLC, other than that I really liked it. Oh, and that it's a solid arrangement of, electronic dance music, which I guess means if you don't like EDM, you're sort of shit out of luck, but it also has Carpenter Brew's Roller Mobster, which likely has to be one of my favorite tracks, and it's in the game at just this exquisitely dramatic moment. And there's the tracing music, and there's the music for the end of the DLC, and it's all just so good. Okay, so, music aside, when we come to the art, I got nothing. I mean, graphically, it does a really good job of replicating the appearance of, an old-school computer interface, and you can tweak the color scheme and the background image, but this game was never really about the art to me, because its graphics are really simple. You got me, fuck it. I mean, the programs when you run them have graphics, and those are neat. The sort of things you'd see in you'd see on an old school Windows 95 screensaver. But yeah, except fuck you, FTP bounce. I could do the rest of my life without seeing you trickle along. So all this said, my overall feelings on the game was, well, I went into it not really sure what to expect, and got a gameplay and story experience that had me pretty enticed. There were moments I found myself stuck at what to do, and yet I found that a part of the game's charm, as it provided me with all the tools I needed to overcome the challenges it provided me. As long as I paid attention. Well, except when it finally decided to teach me the repercussions for being a sloppy hacker. Spoilers. The repercussion is getting counter-hacked, and it is a gloriously brutal experience, which turns the fundamentals of what you've gotten used to on its head. And both the main game and the DLC have moments where this occurs that are done in a wonderfully different manner. So, maybe it's because of this that I just found myself sinking hour after hour into this game, head nodding along to the game's soundtrack, and frequently just looking forward to certain particular segments. Enough so that I actually intentionally got myself traced to hear the music associated with it before I had the brainstorm to go look on YouTube for the OST. I might be a little daft sometimes. So yeah, the puzzles, the overall narrative, and the silly moments just had me hooked, and I really do look forward to just seeing if there's going to be more DLC or further content by this creator is going to come out. So, with all that said, for those amongst the audience who like puzzle games, gameplay, and settings which are reminiscent of Shadowrun, hacking, or like Decker type scenarios, and just overall like story-oriented games, and, well, don't have a huge hang-up on graphics, hit this game up in a heartbeat. Like, hit it like a screen door, and feel free to let us know what you think of it in the comments. And as for the DLC, whilst I have at times had very mixed feelings on DLCs for game, the sheer fact that the DLC manages to bring a few unique instances to the table, I figured I'd comment on it afterwards, if only to say that it is a beautiful bundle of writing, which culminates in, I think, just one of the better twists and choices I've been faced with in gaming. Seriously, the final mission of the DLC's central plotline caught me completely by surprise, and honestly, going into that blind was a fantastic moment for me. The fact that it could make my stomach sink and actually feel a brief moment of panic says just how immersive the game can end up feeling. And also, beyond the above, and on a purely utility level, a few of the programs it brings are super useful, such as the much beloved FTP Sprint, which serves to liberate players from the tyranny of the much loathed and snail-crawlingly slow FTP Bounce. Seriously, watching that program go while time ticks down is always a nightmare. So if you do like the main game of Hacknet and find yourself craving more of what the base game had to offer alongside some new twists, I would say the DLC Labyrinth is actually definitely a worthwhile investment. Anyways, this is Arlyeon signing out.